Good day, and welcome to episode 266 of Dial the Gate, the Stargate Oral History Project. My name is David Reed. I am privileged to have with me today a prominent guest star from season 3 of Stargate Atlantis, Johnny O'Callaghan, who played Niam. Hello, sir. Thank you for being with me today.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here.
Does it feel like it's been, I guess this would have been 19 years ago that this episode aired? Is that much? Does it feel like that much time has passed?
I mean, it does on some level, but it's interesting to see Jason Momoa. And I was in
Yes.
Malibu actually at a friend's party about a month ago, and I ran into Joe Flanigan, who
Yep.
it's just it's funny watching.
Did
Um,
he recognize you?
he did, yes,
Okay,
and
you didn't have to prompt him.
we had a bit of a chat, and he was I guess he was heading to do some commercial with Jason Momoa or something, or some convention in Australia. I think I can't, but it's just
Okay.
interesting to see Jason's career go so big.
I know. You never can. You know when people have talent,
Yeah,
but at the same time, you have to have the right combination of not just the talent but also exposure, and then
yeah.
the right role, and there you
But he was a
go.
lovely guy. I do remember we'd go out for drinks after on set and stuff, and he was really, really fun and nice.
Jason?
Yeah, and a
Yeah,
good guy. Yeah, for sure.
absolutely.
He deserves all the success he got.
For
Or
sure.
had. Yeah.
For sure. What do you think of those episodes looking back? I hope you got a chance to at least see Progeny.
I did. I went back and had a look. It's funny yeah, it was an interesting character, and it was kind of it was interesting playing, say, what, like a replicator, is it AI or a robot, whatever, with humanity, and I guess he was the glitch, right? He really was I thought it was interesting you sent me that first episode of Stargate where
Did you see
the
that?
replicator. Yes, I watched it.
So I
And
shared, just so everyone knows, I shared Unnatural Selection with Johnny because Fifth was kind of like the progenitor of our issues with these beings. So what did you think?
yes. Well, I thought it was interesting the idea of betraying the humanity of him. I thought that was a very, and it reminded me of Neem. I guess it was kind of almost a very similar kind of character. And yeah, no, it was very interesting. I hadn't seen that, and I'm not sure how. No one told me that for my research of doing the part, but yeah, it's 19 years ago. It was a whole different world. It's so interesting. I'm still in LA, which is where,
Okay.
and we shot it in Vancouver, and but it was interesting. I was adopting my son. I think I have an adopted son from Uganda, and I was adopting my son at the time, so it brought back a lot of those memories,
Wow.
which was kind
Yeah.
of interesting, just to kind of. And I had a dog Charlie at the time, and
Aw.
it was kind of brought back. So it's been a while, 19 years. Wow, it's a long time.
Dogs are the best people too, man.
Yes,
What
yeah.
kind of dog was Charlie?
Charlie was a little scruffy mutt that I found on the highway and in Eagle Rock. I have two dogs right now called Dougal and Julio, which is a husky and a chihuahua. But Charlie was like, one of those special little ragamuffin sort of
Ah.
scruffy dogs that that was like so loyal and so lovely.
How old were you when you knew that acting was something that you wanted to do with your life? And tell me the story of how that came to be, if you don't mind,
Yeah, a
please.
lot of it started. I'm originally from Dublin, but I
Mm.
went to university in Belfast, and that was when I joined a company to bring Protestant and Catholic actors together to kind of create a sense of peace. It was called Belfast Youth and Community Theatre, and it was a wild time. It was very interesting because when I first arrived there, everyone's listening to your last name to see are you Protestant, Catholic, and I'm from a mix. Like my mom's sort of side is Protestant, my dad's are Catholic, but my last name's O'Callaghan, so it's very Irish. So they're all like, but it was very interesting working with a lot of people from segregated schools, and this was the first time to really meet each other in a sort of, non-school environment, and to discover, you're either cool or you're not, or in Ireland they say wankers, you're either a wanker or you're not. And it was amazing to see people discover that it didn't matter whether you were Protestant or Catholic, you could still be a wanker. So it was very interesting to see people connect.
What year would this have been around?
That would have been early like night like during the troubles like
Yeah.
like the end of the like 1989,
Okay.
1991,
So right
92.
around in it.
I
So this
graduated in
is
93, yeah.
okay. So people aren't not they're cool heads, you know. What you're doing is um on the edge.
Yeah, because sometimes you'd wake up and you'd hear bombs go off, or people would follow like you home with guns pointing at you and at the time, and so yeah, it was kind of cool, and maybe I didn't maybe think of it as cutting edge kind of in a way, but it was an amazing time, and I loved how we'd spend so long improvising the characters. Like you'd spend maybe go shopping as the character, or you'd spend a weekend. It was very kind of like Mike Lee, sort of. I don't know if you're familiar with that filmmaker and his sort of like you'd really improvise the character. So it was a really fun. So I can imagine going shopping as Niam, but it would be a it was a lot of great research and it was a fun time to kind of enjoy and to watch people heal. It was a very healing time, and that's what started. We all created a show called Castle Rackrent, and we traveled around Ireland in the Republic too. And it was beautiful to sort of see people get beyond religion.
Absolutely. Um what did you encounter uh pushback while doing this, or were you encountering people who, I would just like to have some connection with someone. Someone's doing something different over here. Let's try this.
Yeah, I think it was met pretty well, but it was still at a time. I remember when I first moved there, I think I moved into a very Protestant area, and a
Mm-hmm.
lot of the curbs were red, white, and blue, and I was told you've got 48 hours to move out of this, place, and so it was still quite an intense time for sure. But it
When,
was but it was a fun experience for sure, and it was the mark of maybe where at the time too I was studying computer science,
oh,
which is sort of a computer science degree. And I've never felt so fulfilled doing computers by day and doing theater at night. It was like every part of my right and left
right.
were fully being used. And it's been hard to kind of, to recreate that time where we're fully alive, fully enlivened, if that makes sense. And that was a great time. And the computer science has really helped me in so many ways. I didn't understand because I never really utilized the computer science degree, and sometimes I was embarrassed to tell people I had a computer science degree, you know,
Yeah.
and but it's really sort of influenced even that character when I think about,
Right.
the sci-fi and Neem. And then I ended up when I adopted my son, I also went back to school and did a master's in psychology
Oh,
and
wow.
to become a therapist. And it was interesting that all of a sudden that made sense too, because this is very like Siri and or ego is very like Siri or AI. So it all everything sort of nothing's wasted. I've noticed in life, like nothing is ever, no
Ev-
experience is wasted.
no, everything kind of came together in Niam almost. That's
Yes,
cool to hear.
yeah, it's kind of interesting.
When did you come to America, and were you pursuing acting as soon as you arrived? Was that the intent, or were you looking to do something else? Did you head straight to LA?
No, I went to theater school in Boston, and I
Okay.
did a 2-year program there after the computer science degree. And I'm also Canadian.
Okay.
And so I spent time, although I booked this show in LA, even though it was shot in Canada, but I spent a lot of time in Toronto. So I worked a lot as an actor in Toronto. And then I had a one-man show called Rum and Vodka, which was written by a guy called Connor McPherson. And I did that in New York. It was the first time his work had been done in North America.
Can you please
And
tell me about that show? Can we come back to the other stuff in a
yeah,
moment?
yeah. Say that one more time.
Can you please tell me about Rum and Vodka?
Sure, it was a one-man show, and it was about this guy who gets fed up at work and throws his computer out the window.
I
And it's a
can't imagine
spiral,
anyone doing that.
and it was a spiral, like sort of, 72 hours in his life, and it was a really fun, drunken show. I was sort of, he was a real like character that, needed help, and it was so funny that I've never gotten so many phone numbers from people in the audience after the show. It was like people love a fucked up drunk. It's almost they wanted to rescue me or help me. And we did that in New York, and it went really well. And that's what took me to LA. I ended up getting the same agent as Jack Nicholson, Sandy Bresler, and John Kelly, and they hadn't taken on a new client in a while, and they saw Rum and Vodka, and HBO were going to develop it as a show, but it didn't quite turn out. But that's what brought me down to LA. It
Oh
was they saw the
wow.
show,
Was
and I came out to LA, and I actually say I really liked it. I always thought I would stay in New York. I was an East Coast person, but
yeah.
for some reason, LA, just the temperature, the weather, the space, I was like, this is very special. Because it wasn't I think LA can be a hard city, maybe if you don't know, but I was luckily very curated. There was a woman that the only person I knew in LA was a woman called Nia Vardalos was about to do a movie called My Big Fat Greek Wedding. And this was 2002, and I hadn't come out. So I stayed with her, and she was very lovely and introduced me to lots of different places and people. And so I really saw the beauty of LA. But I can imagine arriving in LA not knowing anybody at all and
Mhm.
finding it quite a challenge to understand because it's so spread out, and it's so you like New York City, you can just stumble across things, but in your car in LA it's much harder. You have to know where you're going, I guess.
It's a completely different lifestyle. I have
It
to
is.
ask Johnny, when you saw, I'm assuming you've seen Office Space, did you feel ripped off? With the scene with the printer?
The which
Office Space, the scene with the printer. They absolutely destroy this printer with a baseball bat in the field.
oh, okay. Right.
Oh man.
I didn't see it. I didn't. I must have missed it.
Must go see Office Space.
Okay, I
I
will.
think that Rum and Vodka. I think that you'd find a vibe for that.
I'll write it
So
down. I don't know how come I haven't seen it.
it's one of the great uh like 9 to 5 generation films, and
Okay.
this guy just snaps. It's not
Yeah.
like Falling Down. Where that's
Yeah.
obviously another situation. Falling Down is
Yeah.
another great film, but yeah. So tell me
It was very
about
similar. It was very similar. And he wanted, yeah, it was
yeah,
almost like he wanted someone to save his life. And,
right?
and as he
And
meets a woman, it's like, save my life, save my life.
hence the cell phone numbers.
Yes.
That's funny. Tell me about um, auditioning for Niam and getting that role and going to Vancouver. So this would have been
Um,
2005, I think.
2005, yeah, 2005, 2006.
2006.
Um, Yeah, it was interesting. I went to Uganda. It was one I arrived in LA 2002, and I had done a couple of pilot seasons, and I got very close. Like my very first audition I booked, which was a guest star in a show called The Agency. And and then I did a lot of auditions, and I was number two for so many different things. I auditioned for different, like be in a room with, for Vanilla Sky, like auditioning with Tom Cruise,
Oh.
and it was just always, oh, he's great. But I was always number two or number three. And it was just interesting. Then I was like, I got a little burned out. I was like, I'm going to go to Uganda to work on this documentary with a friend and a Canadian actor. And she asked me very last minute. And I was like, oh, yeah, I couldn't face another pilot season. So I was like, I'm going to go to Uganda. And I went for about 6 weeks, and then I came back, and meanwhile, while I was there, I met this little toddler crawled into my lap. Like he was starving with multicolored snot and mold in his hair, and he just nestled into me like he was home. And I could hear my heart go, "He's your son."
Oh my
And
gosh.
I was like, "Oh my God, I can't leave this kid." But I spent so much time with him, and I got very bored listening to sort of the ego, the thinking, the overthinking, like, "Oh, I'm an actor, I'm single, I've no money," or what all the thoughts. And I was like, I'm going to follow my heart. And I ended up signing papers to adopt them, but I had no money. And literally, it was my first audition back was Stargate Atlantis. And I don't think I was that prepared. I think I think I might have been still jet lagged because there was a moment where I was there. It was interesting. I think Pirates of the Caribbean I auditioned for before I left, and I supposedly booked it, but they couldn't reach me because
Oh
I know this was before cell phones.
no.
I
Oh
had no
no.
cell phone at that time. I'm sure there probably was cell phones, but I didn't have one, and I was unreachable, and I lost the part. But
But
then
you
this
got
part,
a son.
I got a son, and the first audition was Stargate Atlantis, and I really no money to adopt this kid, but literally within a couple of months, I had a good amount of money in the bank, and I could adopt him. And so when I think about that show too, I think it was very much part of that journey, you know. So, and I think we move in it with intention, and then the universe comes and supports our intention rather than waiting till you're ready, because I don't think one is ever ready. And so I was a lot of learning with all of that, and also being able to say no to a pilot season, even though my agents were like, "Oh, it's going to be a bumper pilot season. You can't leave LA." And I'm like, "Well, I think I can." I just because a lot of pilot seasons at the time, they kind of knew who was going to get the parts, so it was a bit of a pony show, really, and it wasn't necessarily, because they had their lists, and yes, you were always backups, but it was fun to come back and then do the first audition a little like kind of jet lagged, and then and I booked it, which was funny.
I
And
love this story. I love how Atlantis was there to support you in a
yeah,
time when you needed to make a pivot in your life, and the right roles come into focus and lock into place for you to carry out the things in your personal life that you need to. That's really
yes,
cool.
yeah, yeah. No,
Who
it is. It was perfectly timed, and everyone on set were lovely. Charlie was on set,
he
and
was.
so he went everywhere. He's the most travel dog. And but everyone loved them. And yeah, it was a fun audition. It was fun traveling to Vancouver, which I hadn't spent much time in before, in such a great city. And everyone, I can't remember the casting director. Do you remember the casting of that?
This what it was. Is
Would
it
that have
Carol
been
Kelsey
Paul?
at this point?
I don't remember who, but they were all
Atlantis.
very lovely.
Yeah, no, Carol Kelsey, Stuart Akins. There were so many folks who were
I'm sure,
involved
yes.
in
And there's
bringing.
probably Vancouver casting, LA casting, I'm
There
sure.
were there were two of them for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, Tell me about who this character is in your recollection. He is kind of a rogue, and he's beating his own drum in this collective
Hmm.
with a few other people who are hell bent on trying to make more of themselves and more for their world than the establishment, really. And David
Yeah,
Ogden Stiers. Oh my gosh, what a presence!
yes, yeah. Oberoth, right? Oberoth.
Roth.
Yeah, no, I thought it was interesting from a technical. I was watching a little bit of it this morning, and I was trying to get that sort of robotic but human. It was fun to kind of play with, physicality, and a little bit of, to give him some sort of stiltedness, to suggest a little bit, off,
Hmm.
so he'd somewhere to go. Like he wanted to kind of become even more human, although he seemed more human, right? Like very like loving and caring, but also on a mission,
Hmm.
very driven, and yeah, maybe ahead of his time for the replicators, right?
Hmm.
And I think he felt a lot. He's very emotional, which again was similar with that episode of Stargate. It was interesting to see that and the choices that actor made, and watching him sort of, and he was considered like, the runt, or the defective,
He was broken.
yeah. But because he was caring and loving, which is kind of like society though today, almost sometimes, if you're caring and loving, where does that get you? Or because he seemed more human, it was interesting at the very end. Then they reprogrammed, I guess, his code,
On the
and
spot.
on the spot, and then like which is kind of interesting too when you think about how we get brainwashed as society and AI and all that. And because I sometimes working as a therapist, I see the ego very much as AI, how it's all programmed by religion, society, or parents. It's all things that have happened to us. And it's interesting watching technology, replicate itself,
Hmm.
and or humans replicate themselves through technology. And so yeah, it's definitely an interesting character. I mean, I guess, all about ascending,
Hmm.
but yeah, I think he almost had it already. It was interesting that, and maybe it's that. idea too, what we all that the grass is always greener somewhere else, that we sometimes never really appreciate maybe what we got, you know,
That's certainly true. You know,
and where we're at.
the character, the question in the show, you know, part of it was, at least for a little bit there, can an inorganic thing transcend to another level of consciousness?
Yeah.
Or are they just ones and zeros or whatever it is that's in their
Yeah.
code, you know? And I really would have enjoyed us going further with that. But
Yeah.
instead, he gets reset and he
Yeah.
gets spaced.
Yeah, which was disappointing. I think at the time, I think he was quite an interesting character. And so
Yeah.
over the years, people have reached out, like, because it's impacted people for such a small piece too, in a way. I was like surprised, but people have reached out over the years, and I'm not sure why the writers didn't necessarily, because there was talk at the time. I guess they didn't know probably what to do with them.
Yeah, just leave him
And
in orbit and then we'll come
yeah,
back.
yeah. But it
So
could have been an interesting, um, develop. But I guess they chose not to, per se.
once he's reset,
Mhm.
and once he's essentially an automaton at that point, just speaking their words.
Yeah.
Um, unless someone like McKay was able to come around and undo that, it's unfortunate,
Well, I
but
would
he's
think though,
gone.
but you would think though too, though, with what you're talking about the levels of consciousness.
Yeah, is he in there?
I would say it's still in there. That's
Yeah.
what, that's where I do think everything is about waking up. Sometimes because it does feel like we're in our own little video or virtual reality, just as humans, right? Like these do seem like computers too. I think we're a form of,
Hmm.
don't you think? Like
Just an
that's what
organic one.
sci-fi.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think sci-fi is fascinating. And I also teach meditation. I teach meditation, although I haven't been formally teaching it lately, but
Mm.
in classes. But I used to teach a lot of it, and it was funny when meditation was very woo and science sort of caught up with it in maybe 2011 and 2012. So it's amazing how I think science catches up
Hmm.
with stuff. Even with a sense of maybe spirituality
I
as
I
well, because it's
totally believe
something.
that.
Yeah, like because it's like we're souls having a human experience, and that's what this all feels like. I know we're saying we're organic, but who knows as we as we learn more, right? We may kind of be like, oh, we're in a little virtual, we're in someone's little you know video game
I
or our own video game that maybe we've created.
I uh, I think that as we move forward, I think that science will slowly fill in those blanks to a degree, but
Yeah,
it's always chasing that human component of like, okay, but where do we go? Like when we sleep, we're dreaming. Where are these
yeah,
things coming
yeah,
from? Where are we
yeah,
pulling from? And so
yeah.
much of it is our chemicals. What we've
Mhm.
eaten, what we've been surrounded by, what our brain is doing to us. I know for a fact that um, uh, judges on the bench will order more harsh rulings before lunch, and
Mm.
then they eat, and then behavior changes. So you're
Yeah.
almost like, please let me get in here to see the judge after lunch.
Yeah,
So
exactly. Well, that's what you can see how it's so we can be easily manipulated as well. Yeah.
absolutely. Are you practicing? Do you have patients now? Is that what you're doing
I
now?
do. Yeah, I do have a
You
practice.
have a
Yeah.
practice. Okay.
Yeah. So
Tell
since 2011, or no, sorry, 2009.
tell me
2009.
about this part of your life. Tell me about how that fulfills you.
Well, it's been great too. Remember I talked about being in Belfast and doing,
Yeah.
theater and computers. It's quite a similar, even recently I did a play and a performance at the Hammer Museum. I played James Joyce, who wrote a book called Ulysses. And
Mm.
every June 16th, there's a celebration called Bloomsday. And it was fun. So I saw like 10 or 11 clients, and then I'm off doing a performance. And it felt very alive again to be it was fun playing a writer. Well, it was fun playing a writer. And then I also played the character he wrote, Leopold Bloom from Bloomsday. So that had its own beautiful, you know, um, experience of creativity to play the
Mm.
writer than the actual character he wrote, because I really felt understanding the writer influenced the character so much. And that goes back to I think my therapy experience was initially that I think I adopted my son, and I'm like going, fuck, I'm not very good as a parent. This is
Join
not
the
like
club.
so. Yeah, so I was like, what is this all about? And and I realized I needed some good like therapy. And what interested me about this particular master's was that it was heavily about experiential healing too, because they didn't feel you could be a good therapist unless you did the work on yourself, or you're just regurgitating, diagnoses or information. So I found that was a lot of healing to get out of to really live in the present moment more and more. And I think acting is all about how present can you be, or life even, how present can you actually be in the moment. So, and also with Odin, I was like, fuck, I'm not so good at this. And I was like, I'm going to go back to school. So I went back to school, and it was a perfect career for a parent to be a flexible, for flexibility, because I could create, because sometimes I'd be arriving on set with my dog and my African child. I'm sure people were rolling their eyes going,
Who is this guy?
who the fuck is this guy? Because I remember telling my mom in Dublin, like, oh, I think I found my son. And she's like, who do you think you are? Angela fucking Jolie? Like, it was like, like, are you on drugs? It was like, so, so I obviously needed therapy. So, it was,
Oh, Johnny, that's bad.
it was fun to
uh,
do the actual, the work of myself. So
yeah,
that's freed me a lot.
yeah,
Not to, for now, acting is beautiful. I love the craft of acting. And I do acting if people offer me something and go,
yeah,
hey, would you like to do this?
yeah.
And I find that very beautiful, as opposed to pursuing the business of it. I just got very burnt out with that part of it. So I like it now as oh yeah, that's a good script. I'll do it if it comes to me.
I love your take on life in this regard, that it doesn't have to be one thing or another. Like,
Right.
we are more complicated than that. We are
Yeah.
fathers, we are actors, we are people who help one another
Yeah.
figure things out, and we can
Yeah.
also program.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like we're not here just to do one thing.
That's
That's
right.
and that's very freeing to kind of, because I see a lot of actors like early on, I don't think people knew as a therapist that I was also an actor. So they'd come see me, and I was very good at helping actors get out of their own way. And a few start getting big nominations for big award shows, and they were all like, "Oh, you got to go see Johnny. You got to go." And I'm like, I can't guarantee you like an Oscar nomination, but I can help you get out of your own way, because I understood the computer of it,
Hmm.
the mindset, the limiting beliefs, the almost like AI, like if then, like if this happens, then this else, like from the computer coding, kind of going, oh God, this is all coding,
Hmm.
and we've just been programmed. It's not, there's nothing wrong with you per se. You've just been programmed to think there is something wrong with you,
That's
and to
in many
question,
respects, you know.
yeah, to question your thinking, right? Is that thought 100% true? What would you be like without the thought? What's the opposite of the thought? It's kind of what's the judgment you're carrying, so it was very, and my practice got full, like almost like it was fascinating to kind of, because acting sometimes has been feast and famine, probably a lot of famine,
Yeah.
but therapy, it's always been busy, it's always feast, and I think it's a lot to do with acting and also computer science.
Actors, you know, you have to delve into your um I suppose you don't have to, but I don't know if you're going to be any good. You have to delve into what makes you tick in order to pull out a character, because the character is always going to be a chunk of you. Yes, you
Yeah.
have stage direction. Yes, you have to hit your marks. Yes, you have to say these things in this sequence. But still, what drives it is, the ego.
Yeah.
And I can see um, actors needing to come up for air and say, okay, you being another fellow actor,
Yeah.
what am I missing? Because and I do agree with you. Like, a lot of who we are is the world pushing stuff on us. But
Yeah.
at the same time, I'm sure you know this. We also have to be okay. Am I doing something stupid here?
Yeah.
Is this
Well,
where am I missing the mark?
I think it's important to unplug from the ego, you see. I
Yeah.
think we spent, that's what was beautiful about meditation. I used to do these Vipassana these 10-day silent retreats where you'd meditate for 15 hours a day,
I
and you
would
really
not have the
unplug from the
patience for
ego.
that.
You'd love it. You'd love it after, well,
Okay.
day 10, you'd love it. But
Okay.
it's quite intense for day
Yeah.
3, day 4. But I really learned to unplug from the thinking. And then there's the beingness. It's really experiencing the beingness of us all, where we're all, I think, the one family, where there is just one human race. And that's why I look forward to other races maybe coming in. But for now, I think we're all part of the one human race. And I think that
I
gets
agree.
lost here at the moment. And I think the more you can unplug from the ego, which is more the me, the, self-identification, you kind of experience that. And that was amazing, again, raising my son
Hmm.
from Uganda. And you really see that we are all one too.
Hmm.
So yes, of course, I think the ego can get, if we believe our thoughts, like if we can get in our own way, right? If we actually think, I'm special, or like we're fed all this, but I think we're special and we're not special, or I think everyone's special.
We're
It's
special as everyone else.
exactly,
You have to remember that you are unique. I think that
yes.
that's important,
Yeah.
but that
Yeah.
doesn't make you anything above anyone else, you know?
No, I totally agree. I think we're as unique as our thumbprint. Yeah, but I
Yeah.
think it's a piece of love. We're all a piece of love, and then it gets conditioned.
Uh-huh.
Like I think we come in and we get, and I think the key is to get out of the conditioning to be whatever destiny has been programmed or whatever is in there that makes you you. And I think and again, where does that little piece of love come from?
Hmm.
It'd be interesting as I sometimes work with also as a death doula, helping people transition. You
Explain.
know, helping people transition. Like I've been booked to help if you're going through a dying process to go
Oh,
to the other side to transition.
oh, so we're
And it's
talking like
interesting.
in
It's like
like
death.
hospice?
Yes, but if
Okay.
you're preparing for it from a more like I wouldn't be the medical part, but
Right.
the
The
you know what I mean,
spiritual.
the spiritual. And because I do like the idea where souls having a human experience. Again, I can't prove that to be true, of course, but I think that allows me to enjoy my life much more as well, that there's meaning. Like I like a life of meaning. And I think that's what Niam is. He's
Hmm.
craving more meaning. And I think that's what we all crave, but we're sometimes encouraged maybe to think that we are just like ants, that there is no meaning. But I guess we won't know till we transition,
Right.
and maybe if we're blipped out, that's fine by me too. But I definitely want to enjoy the process of being human
Yeah.
and being alive.
I for a long time never believed. Um, I I was brought up in a relatively secular household.
Mhm.
We found the church when I was in high school,
Okay.
um, but I've been talking with people who have seen things,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
who have like literally seen
Yeah.
the presence of someone who I something is happening. And I think
Yeah.
that you as a person cannot, some people can't accept that until they encounter something that whacks
Yeah.
them upside the head and says, I don't know what that is, but I must conclude that something more is going on than I can perceive.
Yeah.
And to me, that's very freeing because
Yeah.
I'm not going to force my beliefs on anyone in this discussion. But I mean,
No.
to accept that, that
It's a
there's
mystery.
God,
How I put it,
right.
it's a
Uh
mystery. And I
huh.
think you can't ignore the mystery. Whatever the mystery is, I don't know, but there is a mystery. But it's
Yeah.
important that we relate to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Don't shut it out. Yeah.
no, and I think most people do, and that's
Hmm.
where they lead to loneliness and separation and isolation, and they just believing their thinking, you see, because most of what we think is not true, but that's what creates the depression and the anxiety because we're in resistance. I love that expression when you fight with what is, you suffer,
Hmm.
or some people say when you fight with God, you lose.
Hmm.
And it's just again, I did a lot of ayahuasca too when I was in my 20s. I would do ayahuasca every week. I had a friend of mine got bone cancer and she didn't want to do you didn't want to do radiation or chemo. And we went on this expedition. And with that, you do leave the unseen. Some people call it an endogenic, like you're seeing visions.
Hmm.
Again, people will call it some hallucinations, but
Hmm.
it's a sense of like the first time I did it, Jesus and Mary came to me and said, "Welcome home."
Hmm.
And it was so interesting to kind of again, because I think I misinterpreted, say, the mystery with religion.
Hmm.
And there's a
Hmm.
because when I was a kid, I think like Jesus like was my best friend or
Hmm.
like a boyfriend almost. He was like so like we were like so, but then religion confused me. All the rules
Hmm.
of religion didn't make any sense. So I think I rejected it all. And then so it was interesting with the ayahuasca was very helpful to because you see dead people, you see aliens, you see a lot of it's a very um, you know, great journey to go on.
At the
And
very least, you're plugging into some other aspect of yourself, and that
yes,
can be
yeah,
revealing in and of itself. You know,
yes, that's what it is.
I can
Yes.
see how people would get trapped in that kind of thing too. You
And it
know,
speaks in your symbol. Yeah, whatever symbols represent
you have
you have, it will show up to teach you.
absolutely
That's
wow.
the idea.
I imagine you have a lot to say about social media and how it's affecting us psychologically, and how we are using it as a measuring. So many of us use it as a measuring stick to compare ourselves against others rather than ourselves against the person that we were yesterday. You know,
Yeah.
I would. Do you?
I
What do
like
you
it just as a
tell people in
photo
your
album.
practice?
I think of social media just as a photo album.
Okay.
Like in a way, just to it's like your own magazine of your life,
Right.
and kind of just keep it at that. Yeah, I don't think comparing ourselves, I think people do fall into that trap and maybe hurt themselves because I think we do have our own journey and it's all, highlights, it's smoke and mirrors, as well. So again, the way I say question your thinking, you should also
Hmm.
question all these posts because they're just highlights. We can all manipulate and just show the good parts
Hmm.
of life. I mean, I plug in and then I unplug from it. Sometimes I take a few months off and don't, but I see the purpose of it too. I think we all need connection, and community, and
Hmm.
there is some beautiful pieces to it,
For sure.
as we kind of, get more isolated sometimes.
For the return, I was hoping that we okay. He's floating around outside of the atmosphere,
Yeah.
so something was going to happen, um, and I have to say I was disappointed because we get you back and then we vaporize you.
Yeah.
Um, what was that? What was reading that script like? Do you
It
relate,
was
or do you think
it
I was?
was
It was great to be back. What are you talking about?
it was disappointing, I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah, as well. I'm with you. I think they set it up to, I don't think I don't know. Maybe they didn't feel I did a good enough job. I don't know. Or they just didn't feel that I felt they set the character up for more, you know, to go on more adventures or to figure, but maybe just there's only so many storylines. I'm not sure that they could.
So I had a conversation with one of the producers at the time that the show was being made,
Yeah.
and in the following season, I don't know if you know this, but we completely destroy your civilization.
Okay.
I don't know if you're aware of that.
Oh, no, no.
We blew up your planet.
Okay.
And I had a conversation with one of the producers about these were thinking machines. Who, yes, they were a nuisance to us. Yes, they had a desire for retribution.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, they were sentient, and as my business partner Darren said, they have wrath.
Yeah.
I think we should try to find a way to make peace. And I'll
Yeah.
never forget. This is just a private conversation with one of them. He was like, "That's not the story I'm interested in telling. I want to do more action oriented stuff."
Right.
And it was
Yeah.
like, okay,
Yeah.
all right then. And so I
Yeah.
really do think, honestly, it was we're going in this direction.
Well, that's what it felt because there was a lot of depth I thought to him. But there was,
Yeah.
I think there was probably conflict on I'm sure there was some people wanting more, and then whoever had the power to make the because it did seem like they weren't sure
Hmm.
at those times how it was gonna. It was almost like we were writing it in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It was being developed,
Yeah.
and so it was whoever made the choices. But I think there was a lot more to explore, and it's so funny what popped into my head there as you were talking to. In LA now, are you in LA? Where are you based?
I'm in Nashville.
Nashville. Oh,
I have
look,
to be near my folks right now. But
yes,
yeah,
I hear Nashville is. I haven't been there in a long time, but
it's
so
exploding.
many people from LA are moving there.
Yeah,
You know, I
very
have a
much
good
so.
friend that just moved there last week. But the little robots that go around now delivering food for Uber Eats, the little wheelie, like it's so interesting watching them, go on their little like to people's houses to drop off the food. So you can keep seeing how this is all going to keep getting,
This
like
is not
almost,
going anywhere.
no, but you can see how we're gonna have lots of different, even it's funny watching the Tesla cyber trucks too, looking so robotic or so, different spaceship oriented too.
You have to wonder at what point does the little thing, after it's been programmed to have some kind of verbal interaction, will turn to the user and say, "Don't do this to me." You have to wonder when that's going to happen. Say, "Ah, just
Yeah,
reset the darn thing."
yeah,
That's an error.
yeah.
So wild, absolutely. Well, I
But it's
love what you
exciting.
brought to the character, and I do think that we did him dirty. I wish that I wish that they had found a way to explore him a little bit more, because I think it would have been fascinating. I think you brought a lot to that role.
Oh, thank you, thank you. Yeah, it
So.
was definitely fun to play it, and I agree. I think but just it wasn't meant to be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And but I like the little piece seemed to impact some people, which was great.
Absolutely. If people are reaching out to you, you that's the thing about sci-fi fans. They get it, and they get hooked on these characters and plugged into their perspectives, and it's like, this work that you did meant something to me. And
Yeah.
that's a cool thing.
Yeah, it is, right? No, I think sci-fi fans are the best, and I get it. I understand tuning in and our imagination, but I do think that's all manifesting too. I do see the world. It will be interesting to see how the planets continue to develop, and who's manifesting who.
Sci-fi is our dream phase.
Yes.
So at some point, there's endless examples of kids growing up in the 60s and 70s with Star Trek saying, "I'm going to go make that," and they
Yeah.
do. And
Yeah.
it's like, at what point is one uh, incontrovertibly feeding into the other? I think it's
Yeah,
pretty
like
clear.
I think even like things like The Simpsons and stuff, right? Haven't they
Yeah.
put stuff in and it's all come in like who's actually. So all these sci-fi
Oh, the
movies,
predictions. Yeah.
yeah, different things, and yeah, who's manifesting who?
Right. Well, you
That's
do
what
30,000 episodes. I think you're going to get something right.
yeah, probably. But still the mystery of it all, I think it's fun.
I have a
It's
few fan questions for you if you've got another minute.
sure, sure.
Teresa MC, just a comment. John reminds me, and several people have agreed. John reminds me of Sir Alec Guinness. I had to share that.
It's funny.
Jeremy Heiner, do you still program at all?
Um No, I
Okay.
mean, all I would do from a therapeutic, I do help people, I think, reprogram their minds. Like to be honest, that's what we're doing. We're with affirmations or, healing memories. I do a lot of healing of memories, like reframing and which it is reprogramming. I have to say the computer science degree is what has made me a good therapist
Hmm.
because I feel I really understand how the mind works.
I have a question about that. Um, False memory is
Hmm.
such a big thing. How, when you are taking someone back,
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you're doing this through hypnosis or anything, but how much of a concern is there that, okay, this is being unconsciously manufactured. This is not a repressed memory.
Sometimes there's implants. Like there's a thing called implants. I think between 0 and 7, right, we're very open to we just absorb. There's no filter. I had an amazing moment when my son was 5. I don't know, and he was like, "Daddy, Daddy, I want skin like you." And we talked about reincarnation like
Yeah.
a few weeks before, and I said, "Remember, we talked about reincarnation. You've already been white. You did that. In this lifetime, you chose to be brown." And literally, he recalibrated. Like you could see it in the moment where he's like, yeah, I did that. I don't need that. And it cut to a few months later, he came home from school and said, Daddy, a girl in my class said I've got skin like poop. But I forgive her. I remember being an Asian girl in a past lifetime, and it was very difficult. So he was able to apply. So I think it's like there's, and also adopting a kid too. Like so schools are all set up. Oh, what was your first words? It's all geared towards kids that have been biologically birthed. So you have to create implants. Sometimes we say, "Oh, you're the most beautiful baby." Like they're implants, right? So I think yes, there's false. I'm all about reprogramming because there's a lot of ideas of going back and implanting positive stuff. And that really leads to having an effective presence today. You know what I
Absolutely.
mean? So I'm not crazy on, if something doesn't support you. So if I'm tapping into people's memories and they come across whether it's, as you're talking about too, whether it's a real memory or whether or it's like some people think it's a past lifetime or it's something else, right? It's just
Hmm.
whatever makes you the winner in your story.
Hmm.
Because the mind is a storyteller. It's the
Hmm.
ego is a storyteller. I think it's parables. That's what the Bible is in parables. And I want all my clients to be the winner in their
Hmm.
stories. And that's what helps you to lead a fun life and to relate to it. Because it's all about, I can't stop the weather, but it's how do you relate to the issue is the issue. How you relate to yourself. Like, can you like really love yourself no matter what? Can you really kind of, so I think sometimes people come across tragic memories and whether they're true or not, I think we gotta reframe them and heal them anyway and
Hmm.
just put them, whether you're tapping into someone else's, your parents, the lineage, you know, I don't think anything is random. I
Mm.
do think that's where I think the programming, I think a lot of it what's in your subconscious is coming up for a reason.
Hmm.
Maybe that am I answering that?
Well, I
Does
think
that make
so.
sense?
And I think no matter what it is that you believe,
Yeah.
our framing device is story, is beginning, middle, end.
Yes, yes.
And
And let's be the winner in the story
yeah,
rather than be the victim. You know what I
yeah,
mean? I like the victim perpetrator mindset gets tiring.
yeah.
So that's why I
Well,
love the
it's not
Buddhist idea.
constructive.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love the Buddhist idea that we choose our parents before we come in, or we choose to be adopted, or we choose our sexuality. We
Hmm.
choose everything, which I also find very, again, it gives meaning, it gives you power. Oh,
Hmm.
these are choices I made. Oh, I want to experience this. This is something not to be in resistance to. Maybe they're
Hmm.
not, maybe the way, like I remember growing up in Ireland and the Cosby Show was the perfect family. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where like I was like, God, I wish I was adopted or this. You know what I mean? It was like,
Yeah. The
um,
Huxtables, man. I want to be in
yeah,
that household.
it was like the perfect,
Yeah.
and then it's interesting to see how that has unraveled too, and the
Isn't that,
different,
yeah.
you
That's
know what I
just
mean?
so
So there's,
sad.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So
But
it's
I,
all, go ahead.
no, I think that that's absolutely right. I think nihilism is so destructive because it
Yeah,
affords you the ability to not just not just claim powerlessness, but
yeah,
also be like, I can't help it the way things are, so I don't
yeah,
have to worry about it. I can continue to be self-destructive, either in
yes,
here or out here, and it's
yeah,
not useful moving forward and up in the world. It's just not. It may feel good, but only temporarily.
yeah. Momentarily, I think. Yeah,
Yeah, really
yeah,
extraordinary stuff.
yeah.
Teresa MC, what was it like watching yourself on screen? Do you like to watch your performance? A lot of actors
No, I
don't.
don't. I don't at all. It was funny watching that particular character though. Um, Because again, I think I was laughing at my approach because I was taking it like again robotic. It was just interesting. 'Cause how do you play? So it was funny. I was laughing. I thought was like that's interesting. At least I made some choices, which I thought was interesting. But so long ago too. Aging is interesting. Watching the age, you kind of go,
Mm.
oh my God, who am I today? Like look at Alec Guinness or whatever. It's kind of like it is funny how he's also raising because my son now is a man and he joined the U.S. Navy. He's doing cybersecurity
Oh
in the,
wow.
in the U.S. Navy, and it's interesting. All those last 19 years have been spent, you know, raising him, and so it is funny age. So it is. So it definitely brought back like again. Oh my God! Like you know, but it was fun. It was definitely good going back in time. Even talking about it today is a fun.
Well, I rewatched it, and I think that there's a lot that informs that because he's not spoken with humans before. So
Yeah.
how we perceive him is not going to make sense. I think
Yeah.
he's going to interact them the way that they interact with one another, which is probably not very often verbally.
Yeah.
They probably just think it, because
Yeah.
they're plugged into a neural network.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah. And how do
think
you
with
convey
that
that,
perspective, that's good.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you
So,
convey it? So I remember being fun doing research at the time
mm-hmm.
and playing with kind of ideas and stuff.
uh,
But I definitely saw the age.
Ganel Craner, do you use any energy healing in your work?
I did some Reiki when, you know, because I was a bit of a spiritual whore freak. Like I would try everything, always stuff. And I think like if I ever get a massage, I will always go to someone that's able to plug into the unseen,
Mm-hmm.
whatever that is, more than just working on me physically. Like I do think, yes, I think every study has shown too with therapy that it's not the modality, it's the consciousness of the therapist is actually what helps with the healing. And they say
Wow.
that about neighborhoods too. Like it's not so much about the family, it's the consciousness of the neighborhood is so important. So,
Wow, because people are thinking a certain way and they manifest
yeah,
that.
yes,
Wow.
so if that answers that, I'm not sure.
Yeah. The Misadventures of Little Wolf wants to know, has John, have you written any books on therapy? Have you written any papers?
I've written a show called Who's Your Daddy, which is the story of adopting Odin from my son from Uganda. And it's a very spiritual, it's definitely a story of inspiration. And I need to. I mean, I've written some stuff, and I think now because I was sort of a single parent for so long, and I realized after a while I could only do so much. But now that I'm an empty nester, and now I have more time, I definitely think I'll go back to writing because I do enjoy, and I do love the holistic and the learning. I love to see the meaning of stuff and the learnings and even so even I went through a major breakup too at one point there like a year ago,
Okay.
and learning about that, like the healing and all that. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff to write about, and I think I'm more bandwidth now today to do that.
Wow. I would think that for a therapist, going through something as this may be too personal, going through something so transformative as a major breakup, part of me would feel like, well, I'm failing at life. What do I have to offer these people? They're
Yeah.
coming to me for advice. Look at what I've just, the
But I think
situation that
that's
I'm in.
what I think it's the same where actors. I think why we love to watch certain actors is because they've been through stuff,
Yeah.
and I think that's why we watch. I think that's why it's what's the Leonard Cohen, the cracks is what shows the light, and or lets the light shine through. And I
Yeah.
think that's why we watch certain people. And I
Yeah.
think going through it too, because I never want to teach anything that doesn't work. So it was very interesting to apply the skills and the stuff. And I think life is always conspiring in our favor. Like I like the idea it's a movie and it's what am I trying to teach myself? Because I do think from a very high altitude, I'm the sort of co-creator of it. And like, why do I want to go through that breakup? What am I trying to teach myself? So I try and get it like again away from the victim, although we have to kind of process that part of us
Hmm.
too, the
Of course.
anger and the grief, and but no, I think it all lends itself again, because we're all learning how to be human and how can we, as a therapist, I think you need to be. I don't think there's any. I don't think you go to a therapist and unless they've learned to transform and heal themselves, I don't think you're going to do any effective work. You know what I mean? So I think the more people have been through, as long as they don't get stuck in it and, get bitter, I think as long as the therapist is able to heal and try, because now I have so much more empathy and compassion too for breakups. I've been dealing
Yeah.
with breakups the last few months with clients and really, understanding how to help them get through it because there is a lot of things that you can do to heal that pain. But it is a process and to understand, no, it does take a year to 2 years. It's a process. And I again, I don't believe in just regurgitating information. I think I watched this, is it the Amy Winehouse biography movie, and I loved how she talked about she only writes songs that she's experienced or been through. And I think we all need to be authentic, and I think we can be a great light even though we are going through stuff. So even going through the breakup, I was seeing, say, 11, I'd see 11 patients in a day. And yes, I'm
Wow.
going through it, but it was great to still be present. It
Yeah.
doesn't, it's a gift in a way. Like I think theater too is a great gift if you're ever going through something because it gets you out of the mindset
Hmm.
into a different character. And that's all. It's really understanding again the mind and it's your assistant, it's all we're not, a lot of us become puppets to it,
Hmm.
so it's definitely relates to acting and again going back to Niam,
Hmm.
that I think he was ahead of his time.
Absolutely. And I think we do can plug into ourselves a little bit too much
Yes.
when, if I'm just
And other
setting
people too.
myself to
Mhm.
avoid danger, that may be dangerous over there. We have to avoid that at
Yes.
all costs. We can't
Yeah.
possibly overcome it.
But don't you find like you live life forward and you only understand it backwards?
Yeah.
Like every experience, is nothing's ever wasted. And I still don't fully understand, say, the break. It's a year later, it's a year and a couple of months later. I still don't fully understand, but I do know I will one day, and I'm sure it will be I'll get what, oh yeah, I needed to experience that
Got
was
it.
for my highest good.
But I believe you when you say, if you're going to help someone make a journey, you can't do it if you haven't made the journey.
Yes, I agree. Yeah.
Sure, there are some things, but not something as major
I
as,
don't,
a
yeah.
breakup.
No, I
Um,
think I think though in general, it's like teachers, it's like even with acting teachers, sometimes I think if they, you know, I think you got to really understand, the process to be able to, because I love to take the mystery out of things too. I think people talk in mystery or riddles if they don't really know what's happening, if they don't really know what's going on. I think
mhm.
people hide behind, and some acting teachers do that too. They don't know how to really articulate the technique or really what is happening. How can you show up, using all your skill set and your
Yeah.
tool. So I think the more someone we can really talk, and
Mhm.
communicate and understand, I think the healing will happen.
Last question for you. Lockwatcher wanted to know, how did they pull off the scenes of you floating in space? Did they have you rigged in something? Were you on the floor?
That was rigged. That was so funny. I saw that. I'm like, oh my God. Yeah, I'm on a little crane, a seat on a crane, a little like and they're putting me in so it's a little seat on a crane, and then I guess they with an arm. So I guess they got rid of that with CGI or whatever. But it was in a big warehouse.
Were you high
And
off the ground?
yes, yeah. It was actually actually it was a lot of fun. I remember like no, that was a really fun episode to shoot. I have to say it was a lot of fun. It was busy. It was a great time, and everyone was so cool. Tori, is it Tori
Tori
Higginson?
Higginson, you got it.
Yeah, lovely, lovely woman too, and they were all like great people.
That closing shot of you, and you're looking at the planet. Is there anger in Niam's mind? Is there is it just blank? What do you think he's thinking?
I think he's confused and sad and
Yeah.
disappointed that I think he still has that consciousness. I don't think
Yeah.
that, but I think, oh God, I'm being manipulated.
Yeah.
I think as a society we get manipulated too. Media, like and sometimes we do shit that we don't know why we're doing
Yeah.
it. And I think he's aware because
Yeah.
again, I do think we are computers. I think we
Yeah.
are some form of technology that we will understand even more
Yeah.
and more as time goes by.
I love how you left it up. The expression is open to interpretation. I'm thinking to myself, oh, he's got to be thinking, I can't wait until someone picks me up, man. I'm going to get those people.
Right. Well, personally, I don't believe in revenge. I think
Yeah.
life takes care of people, you see, because I
Yeah.
do think we're boomerangs. Whatever we give out, we get back. And my job is just to keep being the best version of myself. And I'd like to think Liam would get there. But I don't, again, I love that first episode of Stargate where we betrayed his own humanity, It's because our egos can think, oh, we're the only humans. So it'd be interesting as different, species come
Evolve.
into orbit, it'd be interesting to see how like, again, are we special? Are humans so special? But no, I think we're all, you know what I mean? I think we're all piece of it. The animal kingdom is so special. We're all like, so, the plants, so,
And the
and back,
synthetic is going to
yeah,
continue to evolve with us. I don't think you unring that bell.
yeah,
It's going to be interesting.
it will, it will. but exciting. And I think that's why
Yeah.
we're here, right? To learn to live life and to be human, and even like COVID and stuff, we all learned how to relate. I think it's like we're boats, we're sailing, and we're like learning how to, sail through stormy weather, through sunny weather, and that's what's exciting. As long as we can keep, that buoyancy with life and
Mm-hmm.
that beginning our day, and with that, I think it's a fun ride.
Johnny O'Callahan, thank you for sharing yourself today, sir. This has been very special.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you.
I appreciate you being here. I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the show.
Okay.
We really appreciate you watching, and it means a lot to have you tuning in with us. If you enjoy Stargate and you want to see more content like this on YouTube, please click that subscribe button. It really helps with the show and growing its audience. And please also consider sharing the video with a Stargate friend. And if you want to get notified about future episodes, click subscribe. And giving the bell icon a click will notify you the moment a new video drops, and you'll get my notifications of any last-minute guest changes. And clips from this live stream will be released over the course of the next few weeks on both the Dial the Gate and GateWorld.net YouTube channels. We have a jam-packed weekend heading your way. So visit dialthegate.com for all of the upcoming interviews. I'm going to be taking most of July off, so we're really excited about the next few episodes that are coming in. My profound thanks to my moderating team. Anthony, you did us all proud, buddy. Tracy, Jeremy, Marcia, Summer, thanks so much. Linda Fury, Frederick Marcoux, my animators, you guys are the best. My name is David Reed for Dial the Gate, and I will see you on the other side.